So yeah, thanks for the introduction, like I say, and thanks for the opportunity. I joined BVWS back in 1996, which actually was the same year I got married. So I managed to kind of hide this hobby from Alison up until that point. It was 2020 when Greg, the chairman at the time, put out a call for people to join a committee. So I thought time I did. And since then worked on really trying to do a bit of outreach, not just within the UK, but certainly in the UK to different museums. Um, and other like-minded organisations, but also internationally, and managed to contact a few in Europe, but particularly keen to kind of restore really some of the relationships that we had with you guys, because certainly going back through some of the history books, it's pretty clear that there was a close relationship. Maybe some of that's been lost a little bit, but I know there's a lot of members that still talk to your members, so I think that's fine. But really, that was the purpose of wanting to do a presentation, was to just remind you all what the BVWS is, what it's doing these days, and maybe to look to the future as to how we can collaborate a little bit more. So let me just go down one. So yeah, I'll talk about the history very briefly. Mostly, I'll talk about what we are today and the community that we're now with, and also one or two new initiatives. And I'd probably be plenty of time for Q&A. I probably will present just over 30 minutes, I imagine, but let's see how things go. So I'll go right back to the beginning, because I think it's quite an interesting start, really. This goes back to an issue of practical wireless back in April 1976, when a few guys, London-based guys, got together to start what was then the British Vintage Radio Society and turned into the Wireless Society. I like the phrase that if you put two Englishmen upon a desert island, they will form a club. I suspect that's pretty similar to the US, but this is kind of what happened. Um, it was really a call out from Tony Constable at the time, offering his house in London for meetings, and I think three or four people came along to what was the inaugural meeting of BVWS back in 1976. So it's been going that long. Um, and if I jump down to the next slide, you'll see that there was six founders, as I say, at the time. Tony led it. Tony's unfortunately no longer with us, but it grew from there. A very simple bulletin was issued in June '76, and I'll come on to how that bulletin has evolved since then, and the kind of ways the society has grown. So just get down to the next one. So we kind of been a bit of a spoiler, but we had been talking about this. I dug this out. The actual event, 3-day event, was back in 1984. So only really 8 years after the society was formed. And it was a 3-day event with a trip to the Science Museum in London, and then what are still going is the wireless garden parties, held at what is now the British Vintage Wireless and Television Museum. So after the sad death of Jerry Wells, his house was pretty much put into trust and has become a museum for wireless and television. And Jerry Wells can just be made out. He's the third guy standing uh, at the microphone, but I'm sure some of you are going to know Bruce, who's standing in the doorway. So he was waiting his turn to speak. I think the Sunday then went on to a swap meet. We still have the swap meets, different locations, and again, I'll talk about that. And there was a dinner at the hotels, and then there was a visit to one of the museums, which again is still going strong, which is Amberley Museum down on the south coast of the UK, and that still has quite a large collection of vintage wireless, but they're actually trying to work out what to do with that. So it's pretty clear there was a close connection between the two societies. back in the 80s, and it'd be good to try and see if we can nurture that. Whether we'll get to doing something like another 3-day meeting, I'm not sure, but we can always hope. So yeah, some strong connections there. So coming on to the way the Vintage Wireless Society looks now, we're about 1,100 members, roughly speaking. Um, we organise and support probably 6 to 8 events across the UK each year, and I'll come on and describe those in a second. We run auctions, both live and, since COVID, because it was so successful, online as well. And we publish a high quality magazine every quarter. We've been lucky enough to have some sort of professional graphic designers amongst our committee members. Bulletin editor currently is Alex, who's got his own graphic design company. So we end up with quite a good quality publication, and it's something we're quite proud of. About 12 people on our committee at the moment. Mike Barker was chair for a long time and has been instrumental in the BVWS since the early 80s. He's now our auction agent, and I'll describe a bit more about what Mike gets up to in a minute. But yeah, we're about 12 people. Try to bring on new committee members every few years, and then they migrate generally into the more sort of responsible roles. This gives some idea of the events that we organise, and I'm going to try and run a video in a second, which was produced by Alex, just to give you a flavour. Typically around the sort of bottom southern half of the UK, and that's really down to two things. One is we try to run the BVWS events in central England. So Retrotech and Biggleswade are our own events. And then some of our members run their own events. We support them as the BVWS, but they run their own events. And the more we can get to do that, the better. Probably the largest of those is the one at Royal Wootton Bassett in the West Country. So what I'm going to do, before I go on to describing these in a bit more detail, I'm going to attempt to run the video. It's something Alex put together just to promote what our shows were, and let me come on to describe a few of those and some of the some of the aspects of the different shows that we have. So Royal Wootton Bassett is a typical show that's organised by Mike. It's one of these where a member will organise a show himself. They generally follow the same format. We have the morning is for trade stands and people that just rock up. They rent a table and they want to sell some of their collection, or we get traders that will come along selling valves and parts and so on. And then around about lunchtime, it switches to an auction. Mike is being the auction agent. This is a typical collection, roughly about 300 lots. Takes us then through to about 4:30. And what we're noticing is it's no secret. It's an aging demographic really that's attending. Attendance has dropped, I guess, overall to our shows, and it's really what we're trying to do is make these events as appealing as possible to different people. Mike runs one of these. He runs one in the summer and one in the winter, um, and then we have the two other shows at Goulburn and Punnet's Town that are run on a similar basis by similar members, but they tend to be a lot smaller. Um, if I come on to Biggleswade, it's a similar format, but this is actually BVWS's own show. So in March we tend to have the AGM. It runs all day on a Sunday. Probably get around about 80 to 100 stall holders for the morning session. We used to run auctions at this event. Mike used to just to bring a load of kit up with him. Um, but we found that the pricing is not so great at that. It's a lot of effort for Mike to do so. So now what we do is we just have a large stall of equipment that Mike has collected, and I'll come on to the auction service in a second. But we get members, roughly about 200 visitors, I would say. Um, this is a members only event, although members can bring guests. The other large show that we now run is Retrotech. Um, so this has changed names since it was first created. It was actually created as a commercial venture back in 1992, and it ran at the in a large conference arena in Birmingham, in the centre of the UK. Took over one of the halls, and it was a big commercial venture by Jonathan Hill, who's written various books on the subject. Um, but it was taken over and is now owned by the BVWS. Roughly, probably sort of 10 years ago, I guess. And there are probably two aspects to it that have presented a challenge. As I said, as with the other shows, we're noticing a decline in the number of visitors. I think we're also noticing a decline in interest in certain areas of vintage wireless. So things like the big brown boxes, the 30s and 40s receivers are less popular. And so consequently, the show was renamed Retrotech in order to allow a wider range of vintage equipment to be sold. And what we find with Retrotech, because it's a public event, we get a much wider range of people attending. We get stalls where there's not just vintage equipment, but it's coming up to sort of 80s and 90s equipment. There's more audio, and you're starting to see sort of computing equipment creeping in as well to this. And we're kind of okay with that. We tend to have the space to accommodate a number of people. I think we're nearly 200 stalls at this event. But one of the challenges has been ensuring the event is profitable. So we, because it's owned by BVWS, we are liable for the costs. So if it doesn't make a profit, we take the loss. And then consequently, in the last 2-3 years, we've moved to a smaller venue, a much cheaper venue. Which reflects the number of visitors that we get. That's not been popular with everybody, but it has ensured that the show remains profitable. And the reason that's important is I'll come on to towards the end of the presentation. And here are just a few more pictures of the kind of breadth that we get at this show. We kind of treat this one as our flagship event, really. It's every May. Again, it's a one-day event on a Sunday, and is pretty much the whole day. So moving on to the bulletins. These are produced every quarter. as I said, we've been lucky enough to have Carl and now Alex, both really good graphics designers. I think the quality of the publication is really high. Runs to about 60 pages each time. Maybe some of you guys are members and have them mailed over. I think we got about 30 members, potentially internationally, maybe more. We scan them onto our website. We're kind of up to about the last 5 years. We try to keep a bit of a gap between what's scanned and available for free, and what you pay for and therefore benefit from a member. Um, we've been approached recently by several organisations that are interested in accessing this content. The kind of internet projects. World Radio History is one that we might be interested in talking to, but we've had things like the Internet Archive has approached us, as and have discussed whether we want to make this content available through their portals. We've been a little bit reluctant to do that just yet because we want really to keep the content for members. We haven't put it behind any kind of membership firewall on our website. We're thinking about doing that, but we probably won't do that. But the idea really is that the whole point of being a member of the society should obviously bring with it certain benefits, and we're trying not to dilute those. So that's going strong, and really the bulletin, the cost of producing the bulletin, um, pretty much takes most of the revenue that we collect from membership subscriptions. Um, the remaining profits of the society, such that they are, come from the events that we organise and the auctions that we run. And I'll come on to those in a bit more detail in a minute. So when it comes to auctions, I think we run probably now about four major auctions a year. Um, Two of those um, are online. So in COVID, we were forced to do that with lockdowns and so on. Nobody could come to events, and you can probably imagine that this kit just keeps coming. Um, Unfortunately, there's a lot of deceased estates. Mike and his partner are instrumental in running what they call the auction service. So the widow or widower of a member, or anybody that's got a large collection of vintage equipment, gets in touch with Mike, and he will come and visit with his vans, and pretty much clear out the equipment on behalf of the estate, and then we'll sell it at auction. At these auctions. Now, one of the problems we have, I think Mike's got about 7 storage units now, full of equipment. I think with the 4 auctions that he runs each year, they're roughly 300 lots. But there's a big backlog really, and we're unfortunately having to turn down requests where people will ring BVWS. Because really we're finding that, first of all, we've got a lot of equipment in storage, but what we're also finding is that people are savvy enough to sell the good stuff on eBay, and consequently Mike can rock up with his vans and find that really it's only the lower value items that are still left. However, the auctions are really popular. um, what we also do at our shows, and I'm not sure if you guys do something similar, but we run what we call a bring and buy at most of the shows. So if you've only got a few items that you want to dispose of and you don't want to stall and you don't want to put a big collection into the auction, then we operate this bring and buy where we take a 10% commission to sell it at the shows, and that proves very popular with a lot of our members as well. But certainly we're noticing when we run the online auction, we get a much better price for the units, and a lot of the radios now, the prices have dropped significantly. I mean, round echoes were going at £1,000 probably 5-6 years ago, and now going for £600. really trying to shift some of the items that you see in the front of the stage is proving very difficult. So a lot of those will go for £5 or £10, and some won't even sell at all, and are given away for free. Mike always makes the joke that if they don't go, he'll break them up and he puts the cabinet in his wood burner, and people wince at that. But frankly, I think he's telling the truth, because there is just so much equipment. So we're certainly trying to do 2 online auctions, and it's a lot of work for Mike. Actually, he has to photograph all of these things. He has to put them up on the Air Auctioneer website, administer it. It runs for a week when it's online. So it's a time-based auction for the lots, and then he has to deliver it to various points around the UK, including Scotland. So there's about 6 or 7 hubs in the UK. Mike delivers the lots to there. Then it's up to the people that have bid to actually go and collect. And in all cases, to be part of these auctions, you need to be a member. So it's the way that we're trying to drive membership, is that if you want to bid on an online auction or you want to turn up to one of these auctions, you have to be a BVWS member. And we get a lot of people joining on the day in those cases when we come along to those. Our website is active. It's probably, by modern standards, it's it's a little bit out of date, but actually it's very effective. We're thinking about it. We discuss at various committee meetings that maybe it's time we updated it. But Paul Stenning is our webmaster, and he's done a great job at creating something that works really well. This is where you can download scans of earlier versions of the bulletin. It's where you can place orders as well for various bits of equipment. You can find how to do that. And on the auctions tab, you can not only see what's coming up, but equally there's the previous pricing. So probably a month after each auction, Mike uploads what everything sold for. And so you can go there and you can search back nearly 20 years, I think, and look at the trend in prices for different bits of equipment. And there's various contacts on there. One of the pages that's close to my heart, which I'll come on to, is the community news, and this is something I've been spending my time on since 2020 as part of the committee, and I'll explain a little bit more about that now once I've just covered one of these forums. This might be something some of you are already members of. This is a vast forum, really. It's UK, it says, but actually it's many international members. It's actually managed by Paul as well, the same guy as our webmaster. And there's, if you've not been on it, I recommend you do. There's a huge amount of threads and information stored across here. That's if you want a schematic or anything for anything, it's pretty much going to be here. So well worth a visit if you haven't done. Community is something that I felt was missing back in 2020. I think we had a society, we were promoting our membership, but I felt our connections outside of our society were a little bit weak, and I started around the UK getting in touch with people that are running large and small museums, and there's quite a few of them. We've got one way over in the West Country, which is just pretty much a small house with several rooms of equipment. We've got the BV WTM in Dulwich, as I spoke about. So this has now got 8 or 9 outbuildings as well as the main house, full of equipment. As I say, currently being renovated. A lot of the outbuildings were past their sell by date, really, and they've been renovated now to protect the equipment much more effectively. We've got the Museum of Communications up in Scotland, and we've even got a really nice museum in Orkney. One I really need to go and see. It's a tiny museum, but it's up there. And of course, we have famous areas in the UK. We have the most southerly point in the UK, the Lizard in Cornwall, where Marconi proved that first of all that radio waves could could go over the horizon when he communicated. He went from the Lizard to the Isle of Wight in the south, and then of course the transatlantic from Poldhu. So there's a small museum. The huts where Marconi used to do his transmissions are still there, remarkably, um, and they're now holiday let, but also an amateur radio station. And then the Poldhu Marconi Centre is on the west coast of the Lizard, and is still a very active amateur radio station, as well as a museum. A big focus there on maritime communications, um, and sort of more modern aspects of amateur radio. So again, there's a lot going on, and I thought we needed to remind ourselves of these around the UK. So for a while in the bulletin, I had a page where I was explaining, these things, promoting them basically, um, for the benefit of our members, and of course for the benefit of the people running the museums. Um, and I've not just done the UK. So, like I said, I was very keen to talk to you guys, and I'm glad we've got that opportunity tonight. Um, but also been in touch with people around Europe. We have a little bit more of a language barrier around Europe. Members to members, it's a little bit more difficult to nurture that kind of relationship. But we do, the museums around Europe are very vastly stocked, and there are active societies in most countries as well, particularly Ireland, France, Netherlands, and so on. So certainly been nurturing those connections, and we had a bit of a grand plan. Myself and Jeremy's now the chair of BWS. We had a bit of a plan really about how we should disperse profits um, from our society. So Retrotech was set up primarily in the early stages um, to support the museum, and also to provide a sort of um, a commercial sort of vehicle for Jonathan. Um, when the BVWS took that over, then Retrotech can generally generate sort of £8,000 to £10,000 worth of profit in a year now, because Greg has spent a lot of time um, refactoring, how it's run and the size of the venue and so on. And what we felt was that we ought to be dispersing that profit to the museums and other like-minded societies around the UK. So we not only have museums, but we have people that are restoring outside broadcast vehicles and so on. So this year we've started what we call our small grants. We've got a bit of a process going where people can fill out a form and apply for a grant, and all we ask in return is that they mention, so for instance, if they put a display up in their museum, we've contributed to the cost of that display, or the tradespeople to come and create it. We just ask for a bit of a recognition that the BVWS has funded it. But we've only just started it, so we've in the past we have dispersed a lot of profits to the London Museum, but we've just had an application from the guys in Scotland, just for a small amount of money, but really to create a display at the front of their museum, and we're just going ahead to fund that. It's pretty much first come first serve, so we've got a funding limit every year. If we reach that, then we simply roll it over is the plan. But frankly, we've only just started, and we're feeling our way a little bit through this. But it's a way of making sure we've got a much wider community for the benefit of the members in the UK. That's really what we're aiming at with this. And the other thing we're doing is a bit of an administration activity, but nevertheless quite important. We kind of realised that we were a little bit exposed as a society. So the UK has this concept of charitable incorporated organisations, CIOs, and they're like charity light, really. You get the benefits of a charity without all the administrative burdens and so on. It's always difficult instigating a change like this to the way the organization is structured. Um, Jeremy has led that, and has gone step by step, really, with doing positive, discussing it a lot at committee meetings, then getting a positive vote at the AGM last year, um, and then moving on to postal votes and so on of all members. And it's largely been very positive. There's been one or two concerns, but largely positive. Um, the biggest benefit to us as a committee is the cover of liability. If we're organising an event and something goes wrong, then through this we are more covered. There's better governance, but we're also mindful of succession and continuity. So by being this organization, it does assist us with how we would continue to be a society in the long term, and that's something we're important. And obviously, being a charity, there are various tax and financial benefits. So these are things that we are moving on to, um, things that we're trying to sort of secure the society for the long term. We're trying to disperse profits as best we can to nurture the whole ecosystem, um, and really just make ourselves a bit more of a responsible organisation.